In this video, I'm going to explain my ideas on a new vessel to help clean plastic out of the ocean, as well as showing the idea that the ocean cleanup is using currently to clean up the ocean. First, let's look at the ocean cleanup idea that is currently being used. So what's happening is the water, let's say the water is flowing this way into the Pac-Man shape. If we take a cross section, it'll look like this, with the sea like that. And let's say the sea on the top is moving this way. So the trash comes in this way, and it will collect here, but the sea is going to see this barrier and it can't flow through it on the top. So what it does is it's going to flow under it. And the trash, for the most part, the plastic, is going to stay up here because plastic is buoyant in water, and its buoyancy is going to have this force pushing it upward. But if the sea flows too quickly underneath the barrier, it's going to take some plastics with it around the barrier. Also, at times, the ocean will go over the barrier when it gets too high, making it so that plastics can also flow over the barrier. In addition to what's happening here on the side view, the ocean will see this barrier here in the ocean, and as water flow goes, it's going to not want to go into this barrier because it has this resistance here due to the barrier. So it's going to want to flow around the barrier. And this is going to severely limit how much trash goes into the barrier, because as water flows around the barrier, it's going to take whatever is in it, like the plastics, with it. So this is the second problem with the Pac-Man shape that the ocean cleanup is currently using. And if you are the ocean cleanup people watching this right now, yeah, this is what's happening with your Pac-Man shape. My idea is this. In the front, as can be seen in this picture, there's a netting. This netting can be made out of plastic or metal. In my opinion, plastic is fine because this plastic's going to be fixed to the craft and it's not going to come off, hopefully. If it does, these will be visited to empty the crafts, and the net can be inspected at that time to see if it's broken. If it breaks, it can be replaced. Plus, plastics are really great in the ocean. As we know from the garbage patches that are out there of plastic, they don't degrade very fast, so a plastic netting will last a long time on the craft to help clean up lots of other plastics. Now, the spacing of the netting has to be tested because we need to have this have as little drag as possible so we can have the maximum amount of water going through the netting with the minimal amount of drag. The more water that can go through the net, the more water we clean up of plastics, which is one of the problems of the old thing, is the only amount of water it was cleaning was this part of the water that flowed underneath the barrier. Now this netting is only the first of two stages for the craft that will clean the water. The second stage uses the hydrophilic properties of the water. So yeah, stage 2 will have this bubbler system, and it creates a wall of bubbles. The reason I went with the bubbler system to filter out the superfine plastics was because something is needed that's going to create the minimal drag. In this system, we're basically making a filter to take out plastics, and this filter is going to go through an immense amount of water, basically the whole ocean worth of water. So we need the absolute minimum drag possible. We could use a superfine mesh netting to filter out all the plastics, but the resistance would be so high that we would almost get no water going through it. By using the bubblers, there's basically going to be no drag except for the pipe that's creating the bubbles, or pipes, if we need more than one pipe to create a nice wall of bubbles. Plastic is hydrophilic, which means it wants to be in the water. So if we have a wall of bubbles, the plastic's not going to want to flow through the bubbles. If the plastic's too big, it will flow through the bubbles, but that's why we have the net in the front to capture all the larger plastics. As the bubbler system collects the microplastics, a fine mesh net or cloth can slowly come up through the water, much slower than it's shown in the video, and collect all the fine microplastics that have collected in front of the bubble barrier and take it upward to be tossed into the collection bin of the craft. Let's talk about the netting a little more. So when we hear netting, we think of, oh, it's going to capture fish. So if you use the net to fish, you'll know that fish will want to swim around the net. They don't want to be caught by a net, so they're going to swim around it if they see it. To actually capture a fish with the net, you have to surround the fish with the net pretty quickly to capture the fish. Otherwise, it's going to want to swim out. So having a taut net like this should be easy for a fish to see and swim around. So this should not capture any fish using a netting like this. Another part of my design is on the front here, how it slopes so that the larger waves, when it hits, can go underneath the craft. If they're way too large, the whole craft will go through it, and there's no stopping that. But for 99.9% of the waves, they all should go under the craft because of the slope here. I also have integrated a easy way to collect the trash after it's been collected in the container, which is it tips up and it dumps out into whatever barge or collection device we can have floating along. And there's a large solar panel on the top. This solar panel is to power the bubblers and to power the rotors on the bottom in the case of where it already has a lot of energy from collecting it from the sun, and then the rotors can start up and move the craft forward faster. The faster the craft moves forward, the more ocean water we're going to filter plastics out of. On the top I've also put sails, so the craft doesn't need electricity to go forward. My idea is to have an automated sail system that can propel the craft forward. It'll see what direction the wind's coming from and adjust the sails accordingly. If it senses the wind's getting too strong, it can even take the sails down so that they don't get damaged during high winds. And when we get enough trash collected on the front net, it comes on up and empties it into the collection area. This design, no dimensions are fixed, nothing is solid. There's still a lot of engineering that needs to be done to figure out exact dimensions and thicknesses of things. Plus, a lot of other work needs to be done so that it can be made affordably. All of this along with the testing that needs to be done to figure out the spacing of the net to minimize the drag. The spacing of the netting that's going to be optimal is going to be dependent on how big of a plastic piece the bubble collectors will be able to stop. So if it's too big, it's going to go through the bubbles. So it needs to be figured out what the biggest size is that the bubbles can stop. From there, we can figure out the largest spacing in the netting that can be used. And it should all work out optimally then. So hopefully this design helps someone to design a craft, or give someone ideas that they can use to design something that will help clean up the oceans from all this plastic that's been gathering there. Thanks for watching.